Hello and welcome to Kathy's Corner. My name is Kathy Holt. I'm a partner and trainer with Stewardship Resources, LLC. During my last video, we went over preparing the fourth quarter federal 941 payroll tax return. And as promised, today's video will focus on preparing the W-2 and W-3 forms. Just as we went over some check and balance and review steps while preparing the quarterly 941 returns, I am going to be showing you some important steps as you work on preparing the W-2 and W-3 forms. So let's start with the check and balances and the review steps before you print the W-2 forms. Sometimes knowing what the end result will be helps you to know what to focus on as you walk through the process of whatever project you're working on. And today, of course, our project is preparing the W-2 and W-3 forms. Now, the end result is the 941 returns that were submitted for the first, second, third, and fourth quarters for the year must tie out to the W-3 form. If they do not tie out, then the church will receive a letter from the Social Security Administration instructing you to correct the errors. Now, that could mean having to amend the 941 returns. It could also mean having to amend W-2 forms, and most likely there's going to be penalties and interest involved in this. So it's much easier to get it right the first time. So making sure that each quarterly 941 return is correct throughout the year is really the first important step to preparing the W-2 and W-3 forms. Let me give you a helpful tip here. Do not submit the fourth quarter 941 until you make sure that the first through the fourth quarter 941s will tie out to the W-3 form. In my last Kathy's Corner video, preparing the fourth quarter federal 941, we covered information on how to be sure the quarterly 941 returns are correct. So if you missed that video, a link to it and other helpful resources are in the resource section of this video. All right, so let's get started on specific checks and balances for the W-2 and W-3 forms. So we already talked about how the first step is having correct first through fourth quarter 941 returns. Okay, now step number 2, you will need to print a report from your payroll software that shows all the payroll items used in processing payroll for the year by employee as a check and balance for the W-2 forms. Now, this report should include the annual totals for every payroll item used in processing payroll for each employee for the year. In the last video, we went over the importance of knowing how every payroll item should flow to the 941 return. For the W-2 forms, it is important that you know how every payroll item should flow to the W-2 form. Now, here is an example of a payroll report showing the information needed that we just talked about, and you will be using it for step 3. So step 3 is you need to know if each item on the payroll item summary report will add to or subtract from federal, state, and local wages, add to or subtract from Social Security and Medicare wages. Will that amount appear in box 12 with a specific code, and what is that code? Are there any check marks that are required in box 13 of the W-2? And should any amounts flow to box 14 of the W-2? Moving on to step number 4, calculation totals are needed for each employee for the federal wages, state and local wages, Social Security and Medicare wages, federal taxes withheld, Social Security taxes withheld, Medicare taxes withheld, and totals for amounts that should be showing in box 12. And I could add here also in box 14. Now that we've gone over the homework that needs to happen before printing the W-2 and W-3 forms, let's move on to step 5, which is going to be printing the W-2 forms from your payroll software. Now, unfortunately, I cannot cover multiple software possibilities for the printing process here. What I can do at this point is I can show you what the W-2 and W-3 form should look like. And I can give you the check and balances that you need to tie out the first through fourth quarter 941 payroll tax returns to the W-3 form. Here is an example of a pastor's W-2 form. Notice there are no Social Security or Medicare wage amounts and no Social Security and Medicare taxes withheld. And that is because pastors are dual status employees who have only federal and state wages as far as the church is concerned. They are self-employed for Social Security and Medicare wage purposes. Now, in the resource section, there are links to a video series I did on church and clergy payroll. And if you need more explanation on this, please feel free to check out those videos. So moving forward, you're going to review the amounts on each W-2 to make sure that they are correct. So how you're going to do that is you are going to compare the totals that you calculated from the payroll item summary report that we just talked about from step 4. And if they do not match, do not go further until the needed corrections have been made. Generally, the federal wages and the state wages will be the same amount. Are all the amounts in the correct boxes? Correct codes for box 12, correct check marks if needed, and box 13. Again, if something is not correct, do not go further until the corrections have been made. Here's an example of a lay employee's W-2 form. Notice that there are Social Security and Medicare wage amounts and Social Security and Medicare taxes showing. So just like you did for the pastor's W-2, you're going to compare amounts, compare the totals that you calculated from the payroll item summary report from step 4 to what's showing on the W-2. And again, if they do not match, do not go further until the needed corrections are made. And again, generally the federal wages and state wages are the same amount. Are the amounts in the correct boxes, correct codes for box 12, correct check marks if needed, and box 13. So you're checking all those. And once you have reviewed all of the W-2 forms for all the employees, then you're ready to go on to review the W-3 form. And here is an example of a W-3 form. Now, the W-3 is a transmittal for all the W-2 forms. So the totals from the W-2 forms automatically flow to the W-3 form. You should not be able to change any amounts on this form. The one change you may need to make is to change the kind of employer to 501c non-government. The check and balance for this step is to add the amounts from the first, second, third, and fourth quarter returns, copies of the ones that you submitted to the IRS. And those totals should match the amounts that's showing on the W-3 form. So you're going to have the total federal wages from the 941 returns. You're going to add all 4 of those up from the 4 returns. It should match what you've got in box 1 here of the W-3 form. Check out in the same way, you want the total federal taxes withheld. You want the total Social Security wages. And you want the total Medicare wages. An exception are the Social Security and Medicare tax totals. On the 941 returns, the amount is for the amount withheld plus the employer match. On the W-2 form, the amount is for the amount withheld only. So to do your check and balance, you're going to take the total Social Security taxes from the 941, and once you have that total, you're going to divide it in half. And the result should be within pennies of the amount showing on the W-3 form, and that's due to a rounding thing. Then you're going to do the same thing with the Medicare taxes. Total of Medicare taxes on all for the 941 returns. You're going to get that total. You're going to divide it by 2, and it should be within pennies of what's showing on your W-3 form. So the Social Security and Medicare tax totals, they can be off a few cents, but everything else on there, all the other amounts on there should be to the penny. And if the totals do not match, that most likely means that one or more of the 941 returns are not correct. And don't go further until you have discovered the cause of the difference and have made the corrections. Corrections may include the payroll setup may be incorrect or used improperly, and you will need to make any corrections if that's the case. And at this point, the corrections will most likely include that one or more of the 941 quarterly 941's returns will need to be amended. And if that is the case, you need to do it through a Form 941X. And that's the form you send to the IRS. You do not go into your program, make the corrections, print out a new 941 return and send that to the IRS. You don't want to do that. That's just going to make problems for you. It has to be the 941X. Your payroll software may or may not prepare the 941X form. You can find it if needed at irs.gov on their website. Okay, so we will get back to the final step, number 6, of printing and e-filing the W-2 and W-3 forms. But first, let me just jump in here and say that knowledge is the key. You say, Kathy, okay, key to what? Well, at this point, I think you can see why it is very important to understand church and clergy payroll and to know how to set up and use the payroll module properly. To know how to tell if the 941 returns are correct, how to tell if the W-2 and W-3 forms are correct. Now, you have already seen during this process that if the calculations we have gone over do not match, you are not to go further until you determine why they don't match and make any needed corrections. My question for you now is, do you need help in obtaining that knowledge? Are you unsure if your payroll module is set up properly? Do you think or do you know that there are errors, but not sure how to correct them? So who can you call for help? Well, you are more than welcome to call us here at Stewardship Resources, LLC. And why should you call us? We are specialists in church and clergy payroll and the related IRS rules. And we can help you with any needed payroll corrections, any payroll setup corrections in your program, and we can help you with any needed amended payroll returns if that's what you need help with. So now I know that sounds like a commercial, but I just wanted you to know that we are here to help you if and when help is needed. So, okay, let's continue with step number 6. Normally, W-2 and W-3 forms are due by January 31st. However, because the 31st falls on Saturday in 2026, you get a couple of extra days to do your work. And the due date now for the W-2 and W-3 forms is Monday, February the 2nd. Now, whether you can print or e-file the W-2 and W-3 forms directly from your payroll software, it is very important to save a copy for your records. And the reason is because you cannot obtain a copy from the Social Security Administration at a later date. So make sure you have a copy for your records. Now, another thing to note here is that since 2024, the IRS issued the rule that if you have 10 or more forms to file for the year, and that includes the number of 1099 forms plus the number of W-2 forms, then those forms, all of those forms, 1099 and W-2s, must be filed electronically. Now, if you try to just mail them into the Social Security Administration, the rules say that they are going to count them as not being filed. Now, if you have less than 10 forms, the total of 1099 plus W-2 forms, and you're still under 10, not at 10, but under 10, you have the option of mailing the forms to the Social Security Administration, or you can still e-file them if you wish. During our time together today, I hope you have learned why it is so important to understand the IRS rules related to the payroll for your church, know that your payroll items have been set up correctly, know how those payroll items should flow to the 941 payroll tax return, as well as the W-2 and W-3 forms. How important it is to have review and check and balance steps when preparing not only the 941 payroll tax returns, but the W-2 and W-3 forms. If you watched the Kathy's Corner video on preparing the quarterly 941 payroll tax returns, hopefully you are even more aware of why it is so important that those returns are completed correctly throughout the year. January is generally already a very full month for church bookkeepers. So save yourself from having to add payroll cleanup and amending prior quarterly 941 returns to your already full to-do list. As a reminder, don't forget to check out the helpful resources in the resource section of this video. It has been a pleasure to share this information with you today. As always, if you have any questions or need help, please feel free to reach out to me at the phone number or the email shown below. Please like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, God bless you and have a fantastic day.